Marcus Williams was 39 years old, an HVAC technician with a salary of $61,000 a year, and his world was about to be dismantled by a single piece of mail. It arrived on a Friday at 4:18 p.m., tucked between a flyer for a local pizzeria and a water bill. The envelope was a stark, menacing shade of beige, with a clear plastic window showing his name and the address of the small Eastland bungalow he had poured his life into. The return address was the Mecklenburg County Courthouse. His heart, which had been humming along with the satisfaction of a successfully repaired commercial air handler in uptown Charlotte, began to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs. He stood on his porch, the scent of recently cut grass hanging in the humid Carolina air, and felt a cold dread seep into his bones, a dread that had nothing to do with the weather. He had lived in this house for 9 years, 7 of them, before he'd even met Bria. He'd bought it as a foreclosure, a wreck with good bones on a quiet street. He'd spent every spare weekend and a significant portion of his modest income turning it from a shell into a home. He'd replaced the roof himself, laid the hardwood floors with his father, and planted the gardenia bushes that now bloomed fragrantly by the porch steps. For the last 2 years, it had been their home, or so he had thought. He ripped the envelope open, his hands, usually so steady when calibrating a thermostat or soldering a copper pipe, trembling slightly. The document inside was dense with legal text, but a few words leaped out at him, sharp and cruel as broken glass. Petition for dissolution of marriage, exclusive possession of the marital residence, and a reference to a quitclaim deed filed and recorded. He didn't understand all of it, but he understood enough. Bria was divorcing him, and she was claiming sole ownership of his house. The house his father had helped him buy, the house that held the sweat of his own labor. A wave of nausea washed over him. He stumbled inside, dropping the rest of the mail onto the small entryway table, a $150 piece from a discount furniture store he'd assembled himself. He sank onto the sofa, a comfortable but worn $800 sectional they'd bought together, and stared at the papers. A quitclaim deed? He'd never signed such a thing. He would remember signing away his own home, wouldn't he? The thought was a frantic question mark in the fog of his shock. What was happening? This had to be a mistake, a terrible, bureaucratic error. But deep down, a colder, more terrifying certainty began to form. This was no mistake. Was this why she had been so distant lately? Why her phone was always angled away from him? Why conversations about the future felt like navigating a minefield? He thought back, his mind racing through the past few months, searching for a clue, a warning sign he'd missed. He was a simple man. He fixed things that were broken. He believed in honesty, in putting in the work, in the quiet integrity of a job well done. He believed the foundation of a marriage was built on the same principles. He had no idea how wrong he was. The weight of the betrayal was a physical thing, pressing down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. He looked around the living room, at the shelves he'd built, the walls he'd painted, the very air he'd conditioned, and felt like a stranger in his own life. Then a memory surfaced, faint at first, then sharp and clear. His father, on his wedding day 2 years ago. The memory was so vivid it was almost a haunting. His father, a quiet, proud black man with hands as calloused as his own, pulling him aside just before the reception. He'd pressed a thick, sealed envelope into Marcus's hand. It was a simple, standard number 10 envelope, but it felt heavy with unspoken meaning. "Son," his father had said, his voice low and serious, "I hope you never have to open this. I truly do. But life can be unpredictable. Put this somewhere safe, and you only open it if she files." Marcus had been confused, a little hurt even. "Dad, it's my wedding day. Bria is wonderful. His father had just squeezed his shoulder, a sad wisdom in his deep brown eyes. "I know, just promise me. Open it when, and only when, she files." Marcus had promised, tucking the envelope away and promptly forgetting about it in the haze of newlywed bliss. He hadn't thought of it since, until now. She filed last Friday. What could you do when the person you promised to build a life with had been secretly digging a grave for your future together? We see stories like Marcus's all the time, where good, hard-working people are blindsided by calculated betrayal. If you've ever felt underestimated or taken for granted, let me know in the comments. And stick with me to see how a father's quiet love, recorded in blue ink, became the weapon his son needed to reclaim his life. The life Marcus had built with Bria was a carefully curated facade of domestic normalcy, but looking back, the cracks were always there, plastered over with his own determined optimism. He earned his $61,000 a year with his hands and his mind, diagnosing complex HVAC systems in the towering glass buildings of uptown Charlotte. He came home smelling of machine oil and honest sweat, wearing his standard issue work pants that cost $45 a pair and steel-toed boots that ran him $120. Bria worked in marketing for a mid-level firm, earning closer to $85,000, and she came home smelling of a $250 bottle of Chanel perfume. She saw his work as a means to an end, the end being the mortgage payment on the house she increasingly referred to as her investment. One Saturday morning, about a year into their marriage, Marcus was under the kitchen sink, a $15 basin wrench in hand, replacing a leaky gasket that cost less than $1. His deep brown skin was luminous, even in the dim light of the cabinet. "Almost got it," he called out, his voice muffled. Bria walked in, holding her phone. She was dressed for brunch with her sister Tasha, in a vibrant floral dress that cost $350. "Marcus, honey, can you please try to be done with that soon? Tasha's picking me up, and the sound of that clanging is giving me a headache." She didn't offer to help. She never did. She saw the house not as a series of systems to be maintained, but as a backdrop for her life. "And please," she added, her nose wrinkling slightly, "make sure you clean up properly. I don't want grease stains on my new quartz countertops." The countertops had been her idea, a $7,000 upgrade he'd paid for out of his savings, money he had earmarked for a new work truck. He just grunted in response, tightening the final nut. The leak was fixed. That was what mattered to him. Their financial lives were a constant, quiet tug of war. He managed their household budget on a meticulous spreadsheet, tracking every dollar. She saw budgets as suggestions, guidelines to be bent. He drove a 2012 Toyota Camry with 187,000 miles on it, paid off years ago. She leased a new white BMW 3 Series, a $43,000 car with a monthly payment of $580 that made him wince every time it was debited from their joint account. "It's about image, Marcus," she'd say, tossing him the keys so he could move it out of the driveway. "In my world, you can't show up to a client meeting in that." She would gesture vaguely at his Camry. The insult was never direct, but it was always there, hanging in the air between her expensive handbag and his worn-out Timex watch. The most critical scene, the one he now replayed in his mind with sickening clarity, was their wedding rehearsal. It was held at a trendy restaurant in South End, a place with exposed brick and $18 cocktails. The bill for the dinner alone was over $3,000, paid for by her parents. Marcus felt a little out of place in his $300 suit, surrounded by her family and friends, all polished and effortlessly affluent. His own family was there, quieter, observing. His father sat beside him, his gaze missing nothing. Halfway through the dessert course, Bria's sister Tasha slid into the seat next to him. Tasha was Bria, but sharper, with harder edges and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She placed a sleek leather portfolio on the table. "Okay, lovebirds," she said, her voice a little too loud. "Just one tiny piece of boring paperwork to get out of the way before the big day." Bria smiled at him, a dazzling, brilliant smile that could have powered the city. "It's just a little something for the house, baby. A marriage gift form. It just puts everything in both our names officially. As a married couple. A fresh start." Marcus, full of wine and happiness, felt a swell of love for her. It seemed like such a romantic gesture. Tasha slid a single document and a pen out of the portfolio. It was dense with text. "Don't even try to read it," Tasha laughed, waving a dismissive hand. "It's just standard legal stuff. Sign here, here, and here." She pointed to 3 yellow sticky tabs. "Think of it as the first official act of your marriage." He looked at Bria. She squeezed his hand under the table. "It's for us," she whispered. So he signed. He didn't read the words quitclaim deed. He didn't see the clause relinquishing his rights. He just saw his beautiful fiancée, the promise of their future, and the smiling faces of their family. He had no idea he was signing his own eviction notice. Across the table, his father watched, his expression unreadable, his jaw tight. Marcus didn't notice. He was too busy being the happiest man in the world. He had no idea what was coming. The cruelty didn't start with the legal filing. It had been accumulating for months, a slow poison seeping into the foundations of their marriage. The escalating betrayal was a series of small humiliations, each one designed to make him feel inadequate, to grind down his confidence until he was nothing more than a signature on a dotted line. One evening, about 6 months before she filed, Marcus came home from a particularly grueling job. A condenser unit on a rooftop in the middle of July had failed, and he'd spent 10 hours in the blistering Charlotte sun getting it back online. He was exhausted, covered in grime, and all he wanted was a hot shower and a quiet dinner. He walked into the kitchen to find Bria and Tasha sitting at the island, sipping glasses of chilled white wine that probably cost more than his work boots. They stopped talking the moment he entered, their laughter dying in their throats. "Oh, Marcus," Bria said, her voice laced with a kind of weary pity. "You're home." Tasha looked him up and down, a barely concealed sneer on her face. "Long day saving the world from lukewarm air?" she asked. Marcus ignored her and went to the sink to wash his hands. "It was a tough one," he said, trying to keep his voice even. "The Williamson building downtown." Bria sighed dramatically. "Well, please. Whatever you do, don't sit on the new chairs in your work clothes. They're Italian leather. I had them special ordered." The chairs were a stark, minimalist white, costing $900 each. They were profoundly uncomfortable, but they looked good on her Instagram feed. "I was going to shower first," he said, his voice flat. As he turned to leave, he heard Tasha whisper to Bria, not quite quietly enough, "I just don't know how you do it. The smell and the grease. It's a good thing you have your own career. With what he makes." Bria didn't defend him. She just laughed, a soft, tinkling sound that felt like a slap. He stood in the hallway, unseen, listening. That was the moment he knew something was truly, deeply wrong. The outrage began to smolder in his chest, a low, banked fire. The conversations about money became more pointed, more dismissive of his contributions. They had a joint account for household bills, into which he deposited a set amount from every paycheck. Bria was supposed to do the same. But she was always forgetting, or short this month. One night he was paying the bills at the small desk in their spare bedroom. He noticed the joint account was dangerously low. "Bria," he called out, "the mortgage is due next week, and we're about $1,000 short in the account." She walked in, scrolling through her phone, unconcerned. Oh, just cover it from your savings, honey. I had some unexpected expenses. He later saw the unexpected expenses on the credit card statement. A $1,200 handbag from Burberry and a $600 spa day with Tasha. We talked about this, he said, trying to keep the frustration out of his voice. This account is for bills. It's for our home. She looked at him then, her eyes cold. Marcus, please don't lecture me about money. It's so unbecoming. I handle the important finances. You just make sure the lights stay on. She turned and walked away, leaving him sitting there with a stack of bills for a life he was apparently only allowed to finance, not participate in. The final, most devastating scene of betrayal before the legal notice came 2 weeks before she filed. It was their second anniversary. Marcus had planned a simple, thoughtful evening. He'd cooked her favorite meal, shrimp and grits, a recipe passed down from his mother. He bought a respectable bottle of wine for $25 and a small, delicate silver bracelet for $150. He set the table on their back patio, overlooking the garden he so lovingly tended. He lit candles. When Bria got home, she walked right past the patio door. "What's all this?" she asked, not with delight, but with irritation. "I told you, Tasha and I are going to that new place in Myers Park tonight. It's a networking thing." He stared at her, the wooden spoon still in his hand. "You didn't tell me that, Bria. It's our anniversary." She rolled her eyes, a gesture of pure, unadulterated contempt. "Marcus, it's a Tuesday. We can celebrate this weekend. This is important for my career. Don't be so dramatic." She went upstairs to change into a sleek black dress that cost $800. He stood alone in the kitchen, the smell of garlic and thyme filling the air, the candles flickering on the patio. He looked at the two-place settings, the carefully plated food getting cold. She didn't even acknowledge the gift-wrapped box on the table. When she came downstairs, she kissed the air somewhere near his cheek. "Don't wait up," she said, and then she was gone. He ate his anniversary dinner alone, the silence of the house pressing in on him. He knew with a gut-wrenching certainty that he wasn't just losing a wife. He was being erased from his own life, methodically and cruelly. He just didn't yet know that the paperwork for his erasure had already been signed. The memory of his father's words, "Open when she files," cut through the paralysis of his shock. Marcus pushed himself off the sofa, his movements stiff, robotic. The thick envelope. Where had he put it? His mind, a frantic librarian, flipped through catalogs of memory. Not the safe deposit box at the bank, that was for joint documents, a place Bria had access to. He needed a place that was his alone. And then he remembered. He walked to the small office at the back of the house, a room filled with his things, his technical manuals, his framed HVAC certifications, and against the far wall, his father's old desk. It was a heavy oak desk, scarred and stained from 50 years of use. His father, a meticulous bookkeeper for a small construction company his whole life, had passed away a year before the wedding. Marcus had inherited the desk, a piece of furniture that was more of a monument to his father's quiet, steady nature. He had put the envelope in the bottom left drawer, tucked beneath a stack of his father's old, pristine ledger books. A place of honor, a place of safety. He pulled the drawer open. It smelled of old paper, cedar, and his father's integrity. There it was, a plain white envelope, his name written on the front in his father's strong, familiar script. His hands were shaking again as he picked it up. He could feel the thickness of the papers inside. He used his thumb to break the seal, the sound of tearing paper unnaturally loud in the silent house. Inside there was no letter, no dramatic confession. There was only a thin blue ledger book, identical to the ones his father had used for work his whole life. And on top of it, a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. He unfolded the paper first. It was a notarized statement dated the week before his wedding. It was signed by his father. It read, "To whom it may concern, I, James Williams, attest that my son, Marcus Williams, has been the sole financial contributor to the purchase and upkeep of the property located at 2351 Eastland Drive, Charlotte, North Carolina, from its purchase on May 12, 2012, until the date of his marriage. The enclosed ledger contains a complete record of these contributions." His breath hitched. He opened the blue ledger. The first page was titled, in his father's perfect block lettering, "Eastland Property Ledger, M. Williams." And then, page after page of meticulous, handwritten entries. Each line was a testament to his father's quiet, watchful love. He had recorded everything. May 12, 2012. Check number 1043 to Mecklenburg County Register of Deeds, $2,500. Down payment. May 15, 2012. Check number 1045 to Wells Fargo Home Mortgage, $98,700. Initial mortgage, principal. The entries continued, month after month, year after year. Every mortgage payment recorded with the date, check number, and amount. June 1st, 2012. Check number 1051, $812.50. Mortgage P&I. July 1st, 2012. Check number 1062, $812.50. Mortgage P&I. He had even documented the major repairs. August 20th, 2014, check number 1301 to Lowe's Home Improvement, $8,245.17. New roof materials. August 22nd, 2014. Canceled check copy to Miguel's Roofing, $4,500. Roof labor. Attached to the pages with small, neat paper clips were the corresponding canceled checks, or carbon copies, which his father must have painstakingly collected from Marcus over the years, under the guise of helping with your taxes. There were property tax payments, homeowners insurance premiums, the $7,000 check for the quartz countertops Bria had demanded, 7 years of his life, his work, his investment, all laid out in undeniable, blue-inked proof. The record stopped abruptly on the date of his wedding. The final entry was the notarized statement. His father had seen something. He had seen the potential for this exact betrayal in Bria and her family, and he had quietly, methodically, built his son a shield. Marcus sank into the old oak chair, the ledger open in his lap. The shock and grief were still there, but now a new feeling began to rise through them. A cold, hard resolve. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was his father's legacy of love and foresight, and he would not let them take it. He felt nothing but a grim determination. The game had changed. They thought he was a simple man who fixed air conditioners. They were about to find out what a simple man could build with the right tools. The days that followed were a masterclass in strategic restraint. Marcus knew that any emotional outburst, any confrontation, would only give Bria and her sister the ammunition they needed to paint him as unstable. He had to become a ghost in his own home, an observer collecting data. He had to play dumb. The first test came that very night. Bria came home late, flushed and smiling from her networking event. She found him in the living room, watching a basketball game on their $1,500 flat-screen TV. "Hey, you," she said, kicking off her $600 heels. "You're still up." He kept his eyes on the screen, his voice carefully neutral. "Yeah, just winding down." He could feel her studying him, looking for any sign that he knew. "Everything okay?" she asked, her tone a little too casual. "You seem quiet." He shrugged, forcing a small smile. "Just tired. Long week." This was the lie, the first of many. Each one felt like swallowing sand, but it was necessary. I'm going to head to bed, he said, getting up. Got an early call tomorrow. He walked past her, avoiding her eyes, the scent of her expensive perfume now smelling like deceit. He could feel her relief as he left the room. She thought she was safe. She had made a critical mistake. The next day, Saturday, was a new level of psychological warfare. Bria was unnaturally sweet, a performance for an audience of one. She made him coffee in their $400 Nespresso machine. I was thinking, she said, handing him a mug, we should really start looking at houses in Myers Park. Something with a bit more space. A fresh start for us. The callback to her words at the rehearsal dinner was a chilling, calculated cruelty. He took a sip of the coffee, the heat scalding his tongue. He needed the pain to stay focused. Yeah? I thought you loved this place, he said. Another lie, another carefully constructed piece of normalcy. Oh, I do, she said, waving a dismissive hand. But it's a starter home, you know? We're ready for the next level. He just nodded, his mind racing. She wasn't just planning to take his house. She was planning to liquidate his only major asset to fund her own upgrade. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. His opportunity to gather more evidence came on Sunday afternoon. Bria announced she was going to a yoga class and then having lunch with Tasha. I'll be gone for a few hours. Don't miss me too much, she said with a wink. The moment her white BMW pulled out of the driveway, Marcus went to work. He wasn't a tech expert, but he was a technician. He knew how systems worked. He remembered that Bria often used their shared family iPad, a $600 device he'd bought for them to share, to check her messages. She was usually meticulous about logging out, but sometimes she got lazy. He opened the messaging app. She had forgotten, and there it was. A long thread of conversation between her and Tasha stretching back months. He started scrolling, his heart pounding with a mixture of dread and grim satisfaction. The messages laid the entire conspiracy bare. Tasha, did you get him to sign it? Bria, at the rehearsal dinner. He didn't even read it. Just like you said. Tasha, perfect. He's so trusting it's almost sad. He'll sign whatever we put in front of him. That was the line, the one that confirmed every suspicion. It was a cold, brutal assessment of the man she had married. He screenshotted the exchange, his fingers moving with precision. He kept scrolling. Bria, I'm getting nervous. What if he fights it? Tasha, fights it with what? His HVAC salary? The lawyer said the quitclaim is ironclad. The house is legally yours. All the equity is yours. He has nothing. Bria, you're right. I just need to hold it together for a few more weeks. I filed the paperwork today. It should be served by the end of the week. Tasha, good. Then you serve him with the divorce papers. He'll be so blindsided by that, he won't even know how to react. Just keep playing the loving wife. Act normal. He screenshotted every single message, dozens of them. They discussed how to hide assets, which lawyer to use, a notoriously aggressive one named Richard Vale, and how to maximize her take from the divorce. It was a step-by-step manual for financial and emotional destruction. He felt a strange calm settle over him. The hurt was still there, a deep, cavernous ache. But the anger had cooled into something else. Purpose. He saved the screenshots to a secure cloud drive, then triple deleted them from the iPad. He cleared the cache, closed the app, and placed the device back on the coffee table exactly where it had been. When Bria returned 2 hours later, glowing from her yoga class, he was on the back patio, patiently weeding the gardenia beds. He looked up and gave her a small, tired smile. She had no idea that he now held the blueprints to her downfall. The playing dumb phase was over. It was time to plan the strike. On Monday morning at 8:15 a.m., Marcus walked into the law offices of Adebayo and Associates, a firm he'd found after a weekend of intense research. It was a small, respected firm located in a modest but professional building on West Trade Street, far from the gleaming towers of the big corporate law firms. He had specifically chosen it for its reputation for fierce advocacy on behalf of ordinary people. His appointment was with Sarah Adebayo herself. He wore his cleanest work khakis and a simple polo shirt, his $120 steel-toed boots polished. He carried a plain manila folder. Ms. Adebayo was a sharp, impeccably dressed black woman in her late 40s, her office neat and organized. Her walls were adorned not with expensive art, but with framed degrees and certificates of commendation. She greeted him with a firm handshake and a direct gaze. "Mr. Williams," she said, gesturing to a chair, "thank you for coming in. Your call on Friday was brief. Please, tell me everything." Marcus sat down and, in a calm, steady voice, laid out the facts. He told her about the house, the 9 years of ownership, the marriage, and the legal notice he had received. He slid the court filing across her polished mahogany desk. She read it quickly, her expression becoming grim. "A quitclaim deed? Signed at the wedding rehearsal?" she murmured, more to herself than to him. "That's an aggressive move. And you say you were told it was a marriage gift form?" "That's right," Marcus said. Her sister presented it. "They both insisted it was just to put the house in both our names, Ms." Adebayo leaned back in her chair, her brow furrowed. "It's a classic case of fraudulent misrepresentation, but proving it can be difficult. It becomes a he said, she said situation. Her lawyer, Richard Vale, is known for dragging these things out and making them expensive. He'll paint you as a disgruntled husband trying to go back on a legal agreement." She paused, her eyes full of professional sympathy. "Mr. Williams, this is going to be a tough fight. We can argue duress and misrepresentation, but without concrete proof, it's an uphill battle." Marcus listened patiently. He let her finish laying out the worst-case scenario. Then, he reached down, picked up the manila folder from the floor beside his chair and placed it on her desk. "I have proof," he said quietly. He opened the folder and took out the blue ledger book and the notarized statement from his father. He opened the ledger to the first page and pushed it toward her. "Ms." Adebayo leaned forward, her eyes scanning the neat blue-inked columns. She turned a page, then another. Her professional composure began to crack, replaced by a look of slowly dawning astonishment. She picked up the notarized statement, reading it twice. "My goodness," she whispered. She looked up at Marcus, her eyes wide with a newfound respect. Your father was a very, very wise man." "He was a bookkeeper," Marcus said simply. "He believed in keeping good records." "This is more than good records, Mr. Williams," she said, her voice now electric with strategic energy. "This is a shield. This is a sword. This ledger predates the quitclaim by 7 years. It establishes a clear, undeniable history of sole contribution. It's notarized. It's a legal masterpiece." She stood up and began pacing her office. "This changes everything. We are no longer on the defensive. We are on the attack." She turned back to him, a fierce smile on her face. "Here is what we are going to do. First, we file an immediate answer and counter complaint. We will not just deny her petition. We will move to have the quitclaim deed declared void ab initio from the beginning, due to fraudulent misrepresentation. We will attach a scanned, certified copy of this entire ledger as Exhibit A." She tapped the ledger with her finger. "Second, we will file a motion for Rule 11 sanctions against her and her attorney, Richard Vale. He had a professional duty to perform due diligence before filing a claim for sole ownership. A simple property record search would have shown you as the owner for 7 years prior to the marriage. This filing is frivolous, malicious, and intended to harass. We will demand she pay for every cent of your legal fees. Her billing rate was $450 per hour, and she estimated the total cost could reach over $15,000. And third, Marcus said, his voice hard as steel, there's this. He took out his phone, opened the photo album, and showed her the screenshots of the text messages between Bria and Tasha. He zoomed in on the key phrases. He'll sign whatever we put in front of him. The lawyer said the quitclaim is ironclad. The equity is all yours. Ms. Adebayo's eyes widened. She took the phone from him and read each message carefully. When she was done, she handed it back, her expression one of cold fury. Conspiracy to commit fraud, she said. This is Exhibit B. We will enter this into the record. Tasha's direct involvement will be documented. She sat back down, her mind clearly processing the new information at high speed. Mr. Williams, she said, her voice now filled with absolute confidence. They thought they were playing checkers with a pawn. They had no idea they were playing chess against a grandmaster. Your father set up the board years ago. We are simply going to make the final moves. Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders, replaced by the solid certainty of the path ahead. He was no longer a victim. He was his father's son. The strike was executed with the quiet precision of a surgeon. On Wednesday at 11 a.m., Ms. Adebayo electronically filed the comprehensive counter-complaint with the Mecklenburg County Court. It was a 47-page document, including the answer, the motion to void the quitclaim, the request for sanctions, and 2 explosive exhibits, a full, high-resolution scan of James Williams' Blue Ledger and the complete, damning transcript of the text messages between Bria and her sister. At 11:02 a.m., an automated notification of the filing was sent to the office of Bria's attorney, Richard Vale. At 11:03 a.m., a process server was dispatched to Vale's office with a hard copy. The trap was set. All Marcus had to do was wait. Bria was having lunch with Tasha at an upscale restaurant in Myers Park, a place with white tablecloths and $30 salads. They were celebrating. In her mind, the game was over. She had the house, the equity, and a clear path to the life she felt she deserved. Her phone buzzed on the table. It was an email from her lawyer's office with the subject line, Urgent Counter-Complaint filed in Williams versus Williams. She opened the attached PDF, a triumphant smirk on her face. She expected a standard denial, the beginning of a long, drawn-out process she was prepared for. As she scrolled, the smirk vanished. Her face went slack, the color draining from it until her luminous, deep brown skin looked ashen. "What is it?" Tasha asked, dabbing her lips with a linen napkin. Bria didn't answer. She was staring at the screen, at the scanned pages of a blue ledger book written in a neat, familiar hand she recognized from old birthday cards. She saw check numbers, dates, and dollar amounts. She saw a notarized statement signed by a dead man. "What is that?" Tasha demanded, leaning over to look. Then Bria scrolled to Exhibit B. She saw her own words, her own texts, laid out in cold, black and white print. "He'll sign whatever we put in front of him." Tasha saw it at the same time. Her hand flew to her mouth, a sharp gasp escaping her lips. "How?" Bria whispered, her voice trembling. "How did he get those?" The blood was roaring in her ears. She scrolled further, her eyes scanning the legal language of the complaint itself. Fraudulent misrepresentation, conspiracy, motion for sanctions, request for all legal fees to be paid by the plaintiff. The world around her seemed to fade. The clatter of silverware, the murmur of conversation. It all disappeared, replaced by a single, deafening roar of panic. Her phone rang. It was Richard Vale, her attorney. His name flashed on the screen, a beacon of her own doom. She fumbled to answer it. "Bria." His voice was not the smooth, confident tone she was used to. It was clipped, furious. "What the hell is this ledger? And these text messages? Did you lie to me? Did you tell me this was a clean, straightforward quitclaim?" I can explain," she stammered, but he cut her off. "You can explain it to the judge, and you can explain it to the state bar when they come asking why I filed a fraudulent claim based on your lies. We have a massive problem, Bria. A massive, expensive problem." The line went dead. Bria stared at her phone, then at her sister. Tasha's usual sharp, condescending expression was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated fear. My name is in a court document?" Tasha whispered, horrified. "They're accusing me of conspiracy?" The carefully constructed world of the two sisters was shattering, right there at their celebratory lunch. Bria's hands were shaking so badly she dropped her phone on the table. It was over. She knew it. The simple man she had underestimated, the man she had mocked and dismissed, had just checkmated her with a ghost's handwriting. That afternoon, the voicemails began. Marcus let them all go to his phone, saving each one as a separate piece of evidence. The first was from Bria, her voice tight with confusion and anger. "Marcus, call me right now. My lawyer just called. What did you do? What is this nonsense you filed?" An hour later, the second message came, her tone shifting to justification. "Okay, look, the quitclaim was just a formality, a way to protect my investment. You know I've put so much into this house emotionally. This is a huge misunderstanding." The third message, 2 hours after that, was filled with dawning horror. "I just read the whole thing. The ledger. My dad's handwriting. And the texts, Marcus. How could you? That was a private conversation." By evening, the pleading began. "Marcus, please, we can fix this. Let's just talk. We can withdraw the filings. We can go back to how things were." "I didn't mean it. Please, baby, call me." The fifth message was just crying. The sixth, arriving late that night, was from Tasha, her voice a venomous hiss. "You think you're so clever, don't you? You will regret this. You have no idea who you're messing with." Marcus listened to each message once, his face impassive. He felt no triumph, no joy. He just felt the profound, quiet sadness of a foundation that had proven to be built on sand. He saved them all and forwarded the audio files to Ms. Adebayo. Exhibit C. The collapse was not a single, dramatic event, but a cascade of consequences, each one a direct result of the choices Bria and her sister had made. The legal and financial world they had tried to weaponize against Marcus turned on them with brutal efficiency. The downfall was enumerated piece by piece, dollar by dollar. First, and most importantly, was the house. The motion to void the quitclaim deed was heard by a judge in a preliminary hearing. Richard Vale, Bria's attorney, arrived looking flustered and unprepared. Ms. Adebayo, in contrast, was a portrait of calm, controlled competence. She presented the evidence, the ledger, the notarized statement, the text messages. The judge, a stern woman with little patience for courtroom games, took less than 15 minutes to make her ruling. The quitclaim deed was declared void for clear and convincing evidence of fraudulent misrepresentation. Marcus's ownership and equity in the house he had bought and maintained for 9 years were fully restored. The market value of the home had appreciated significantly, and his 50% share of the equity, which Bria had tried to steal, was now valued at $155,000. He kept his home. Bria was ordered to vacate the premises within 30 days. Second were the sanctions. The judge was furious. She looked directly at Richard Vale. "Mr. Vale," she said, her voice dripping with judicial contempt, You filed a claim for sole ownership of a property based on a quitclaim signed under dubious circumstances without conducting the most basic due diligence into the property's 7-year history prior to the marriage. You then proceeded after your client clearly misrepresented the facts to you. This is precisely the kind of malicious, frivolous litigation that Rule 11 was designed to prevent. She brought her gavel down with a sharp crack. Motion for sanctions is granted. Plaintiff Bria Williams and her counsel are jointly and severally ordered to pay all of the defendant's reasonable attorney's fees. The final bill from Ms. Adebayo's firm came to $18,500. Bria was legally on the hook for the entire amount. Third was the public humiliation of her sister, Tasha. The text messages, now part of the public court record as Exhibit B, were devastating. The phrase, "he'll sign whatever we put in front of him," became the centerpiece of the judge's written order. Tasha worked in human resources, a profession that requires discretion and ethical conduct. A friend of a friend who worked at the courthouse saw the filing, and the story began to spread through their social and professional circles. Tasha wasn't fired, but she was called into a meeting with her company's senior management and legal department. She was placed on probation, her reputation shredded. The casual cruelty she had wielded for years had finally been documented and exposed. Fourth was the financial ruin for Bria. She was now faced with an $18,500 legal bill, her own lawyer's fees, and the cost of finding a new place to live in one of the most expensive rental markets in the city. Her salary, which had once seemed so impressive, was no match for the debt she had incurred. She was forced to sell her prized white BMW 3 Series. She didn't get the $43,000 she had paid for it. After the loan was paid off, she was left with just over $12,000, most of which went immediately to Ms. Adebayo. She was seen a month later driving a 10-year-old Nissan Sentra. Finally, there was the divorce itself. With all her leverage gone, Bria was forced to accept a simple, clean dissolution. There was no alimony. There was no division of assets, because the only significant asset was the house, which the court had already ruled was Marcus's premarital property, with appreciation split. She walked away from the 2-year marriage with her clothes, her personal effects, and a mountain of debt and disgrace. The life she had schemed to build on a foundation of lies had crumbled into dust, leaving her with nothing. Marcus, meanwhile, never said a cruel word to her. He simply let the truth, as recorded by his father, speak for itself. The consequences were not his revenge. They were the natural and unavoidable outcome of her own actions. He had won, not by fighting, but by revealing, 1 year later. The sun, a brilliant Carolina gold, streamed through the windows of the Eastland bungalow. The house was quieter now, but it was a peaceful quiet, not an empty one. It was filled with the hum of potential. Marcus stood in the basement, a space that had once been a dark, cluttered repository for forgotten things. Now, it was transformed. The concrete floor was sealed and painted a clean, industrial gray. Bright, efficient LED shop lights, a $600 investment, hung from the rafters, illuminating 3 fully functional HVAC training stations. Each station featured a different type of residential unit, a furnace, an air conditioner, a heat pump, all purchased secondhand and meticulously refurbished by Marcus himself. This was his new venture, the Williams Technical Training Space. After the divorce was finalized, Marcus realized the house was more than just a place to live. It was a tool. His father had used his skills as a bookkeeper to protect him. Marcus would use his skills as a technician to build something new. He had gone through the arduous process of getting the space licensed and insured, a cost of nearly $5,000, and was now running a small, affordable evening program, teaching the fundamentals of the HVAC trade to young men and women from his community who were looking for a skill, a career, and a chance. His first class of 4 students was gathered around a condenser unit, their faces a mixture of concentration and curiosity. Marcus moved among them, his voice calm and patient, explaining the intricate dance of refrigerant pressures and electrical currents. He was a natural teacher. He was giving them not just knowledge, but a future built with their own hands, the same way he had built his. One of his students, a young man named David, looked up from the pressure gauges. "Mr. Williams, I think I got it. The low side pressure is stabilizing." "Good," Marcus said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "Excellent work, David. See? It's just a system. You understand the system, you can fix anything." Later that evening, after his students had left, Marcus sat on his back patio, the one where he had once prepared a lonely anniversary dinner. The scent of gardenias filled the cool night air. He thought about Bria sometimes, not with anger anymore, but with a kind of distant pity. He had heard through the grapevine that she had moved to a cramped apartment and was struggling financially. He hoped she would find her way, for her own sake. Forgiveness, he was learning, wasn't about letting her off the hook. It was about letting himself off the hook of bitterness. He had forgiven her so he could be free to build his new life. He looked up at the stars, bright and clear in the night sky. His father's greatest lesson wasn't about money or property. It was about character. True wealth isn't measured by the price tag on your car or the square footage of your house. It's measured by the skills in your hands, the integrity in your heart, and the legacy you build for others. It's the quiet strength that allows you to weather any storm, knowing that your foundation is sound. He had honored his father's love, and in doing so, he had discovered his own purpose. He was no longer just a man who fixed broken things. He was a man who built new beginnings. And so, we see that the ultimate victory isn't about revenge. It's about rebuilding something better and stronger from the wreckage of betrayal. It's about realizing that the best response to being underestimated is to exceed everyone's expectations, especially your own. What do you think is the most important part of building a new life after a setback? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and thank you for joining me on this journey.